Hey everyone, James here, going to be talking today about one of the signature Italian genre film directors as well as one of the two key genres we cover on this channel. Going to be talking about Umberto and Lenzi's Poliziotteschi's and where to begin with them. So really, this is going to be kind of an overview view of kind of the appeal and different things like that of Poliziotteschi, as well as where Lenzi kind of interacts with that, and just recommending a couple of films. So like a couple of others, like where to begin guides, this one's really oriented towards people that are new to the genre, that aren't as familiar or may have seen one or two. So if you're one of the people like myself that really likes to learn about deep cuts and things like that, because you've seen a lot of these films, not necessarily the episode for you, so watch if you like. If you don't, that's totally fine too. So who is Umberto Lenzi, and what is kind of his reputation? And it's interesting because I think you're going to get a lot of different answers to that question depending on who you ask, because people know him from all kinds of different stuff. The man directed 65 films, and he worked in a ton of different genres, very much like Lucio Fulci, and unlike someone like Sergio Leone or Dario Argento, who more or less stuck to kind of one or two genres, if you could count horror and giallo as different genres. But Lenzi worked in Poliziotteschi, Jolly, he worked in Peplum, he worked in horror, he did a virus film, zombie film basically, he worked in spaghetti westerns, he worked in the Euro Spy, Macaroni Combat. So the man worked in all kinds of different genres. But a lot of people have him really pigeonholed as a cannibal director because of Cannibal Ferox. And while it is fair to say that he's one of kind of the key directors of the cannibal film, along with Ruggero Deodato, those films occupy 3 out of the 65 directorial credits he did. So it's not something where he was only directing these films and wanted to exploit that. While he did direct a couple of the cannibal films, it is definitely not representative of his total work when it represents less than 5% of the films. Thankfully, a lot of his films now are on Tubi, including a lot of his different Poliziotteschi's, but he really has a pretty diverse group of work, and a lot of it is very uneven in my opinion. There's a lot of films that I like more than others, but I think perhaps of the different genres, my overall favorite output of his are the 10 different Poliziotteschi's that he worked on. So he did way more of these than he did cannibal films. And when we talk about Lenzi as sort of a director, he was known as a very combative man, sort of like Fulci. He really puts kind of the most out there. He's definitely completely willing to show very unabashed, ugly human behavior. There's a lot of messiness to his work. A lot of people have described his work as very cynical with no shame. And in my opinion, that can definitely benefit certain movies, and other times, it's good to have a little bit of restraint. But I think when it comes to these Poliziotteschi's and these Eurocrime films, it's a good match in terms of kind of creating something like the anti-heroes or just pushing kind of the genre to its limit. In my opinion, he might be the director that embodies this genre the most, the Poliziotteschi, which is a lot of these kind of cop, B-movie, just kind of crime movies, very urban set films. When we think about the Poliziotteschi appeal, a lot of it is very similar to a lot of the Italian films coming out at the same time. Using a lot of the same composers that were doing a lot of these really wonderful scores. There's a noir base to this. A lot of them are B-movies. The Poliziotteschi is very muddled in terms of working class and the politics of the time, specifically the Years of Lead, and it uses the incredible European location, something that Jollies do as well, but they use them very differently. Rather than having the super stylish lighting of Bava or Argento, these are kind of like on-location shoots of these really beautiful European cities. A lot of them are different, so I'm not going to say it's only in Milan or Rome, but it's really kind of all over the place in Italy or Europe in general. And there's a great sense of danger in place. A lot of things are ripped from the headlines. So the social commentary in a lot of these films can hit often like a blunt force, and I would say while other directors are more nuanced, it was more common for it to be kind of more of a hammer hitting you over the head of it. And I think Lenzi definitely fits into that mode too. And of course you have some incredible stunts in Poliziotteschi in general, but definitely in Umberto and Lenzi's films too. So when I'm reading out those different characteristics of Poliziotteschi's, I think a lot of the appeal of the Lenzi Poliziotteschi's are the same as those. He also worked with a lot of the big actors at the time, perhaps most notably Tomas Milian, but he also worked with Maurizio Merli a few times, as well as Henry Silva. Those are 3 of kind of the very big actors that kind of just occupied a lot of space in this genre. Okay, so where should we start with the Umberto Lenzi Poliziotteschi? In my opinion, my favorite Umberto Lenzi film period is Almost Human, and it is also, in my opinion, the ideal way to start. There are certain films that you'll watch them and there's a very disposable quality to them, including a lot of these Eurocrime films where you might enjoy it or you might not, and you will watch the film and you'll immediately forget it. Almost Human is not that film, and in my opinion, this is kind of one of the most unforgettable Eurocrime films, period. You were basically following a small-time criminal, played by Tomas Milian, as he becomes increasingly ambitious and cruel, ends up forming a crew and committing a series of crimes. It's really interesting. This film was originally intended to be a Sergio Martino film. In fact, it has a lot of the same credits as you would expect from a Martino production. Produced by Martino's brother, Luciano Martino, written by Ernesto Gastaldi, who wrote a lot of the Martino gialli, as well as Violent Professionals, which came out a year earlier and was a big hit. But Lenzi ended up directing it. And it feels so much more like a Lenzi film than a Sergio Martino film. It is a very, very ugly film, and it shows a lot of exploitation and things like that. So this is a film, while I would recommend it just because I think the quality is the best and it's the most unforgettable, this is not a film that will pull its punches or anything like that. And I think if you're going to credit Lenzi of anything, it's kind of this shamelessness. He does not pull punches in that same way. You have some great masks that people use to commit robberies. There's a really, really infamous chandelier scene that is just pushes it to the limit. And unsurprisingly at the time, this film was labeled as fascist. There were some very, very strong reactions to it. Lenzi, for what it's worth, identified as an anarchist. And as time has passed by, I think fans of the genre really consider this to be kind of one of the sort of seminal texts, one of the very, very essential ones, and one that you just won't forget. And I tend to agree. I think this film is really, really unforgettable. It's almost like when I watched this film for the first time, I was pretty shocked at how far it was willing to push things. And so, yeah, really interesting, because I don't think this feels like a Martino film at all, even though he's working with a lot of the same people. This is also just a fantastic Tomas Milian show. He is really, really unhinged here. And I think Gastaldi's script gives him a lot more to work on. I think Milian, when he kind of pushes things to the limit like he does here, can be good or bad. There's definitely a number of Tomas Milian performances where he's doing a lot with it that I don't care for as much. Nevertheless, I think he works perfectly here. And I think Gastaldi scripting him as just kind of a loser more than like this badass mastermind or something like that is kind of a stroke of genius. I think it's actually a really smart characterization. So I think the writing and the music score in particular, this one is composed by Ennio Morricone, helped to elevate this film to kind of a level beyond a lot of the other genre fare coming out at this time. Okay, so here are 3 different other recommendations I would give depending on which path you want to go after Almost Human. If you wanted to move more towards a very, very fun romp, I would recommend Violent Naples. This one is Maurizio Merli. It also has John Saxon. It's a great southern Italian setting. There's some fantastic stunt work. I think this might be the best Lenzi action film of the Poliziotteschi's, at least. And it's a really, really fun romp. It's a little lighter. While there is certainly some cruelty and some death and destruction to be held, this is far more of kind of a episodic romp. A lot of the Merli films follow a very similar structure where he's basically playing this extremely Dirty Harry style cop, and he basically is clearing up crime and things like that. So while there is kind of a central story, a lot of it is just kind of a vehicle. So for me, at least, if I wanted to have more of a fun time, I would pick this film. Another path you could go, and I'm going to say this is kind of like the jolly path, so this is a good crossover if you just finished, for instance, Umberto Lenzi's Jollies, I would say Gang War in Milan. Why this film? Well, it has a lot of the lighting and stuff like that, and it generally has a fairly different look than a lot of the other Poliziotteschi's in the period. In fact, a lot of the set designs and things like that really, really stuck in my mind, even though it's one of the early Poliziotteschi's I've seen. I've seen it now a couple times. And you might note that the lead character in this film is played by Antonio Sabato, also a big overactor. You probably are noticing a trend there with Lenzi playing a pimp. So he loves to cast, there's a lot of just kind of amoral characters that we are introduced to when it comes to an Umberto and Lenzi film. So if you're looking for someone to root for or something like that, Lenzi film maybe not the best place to go there. Nonetheless, I like this film quite a bit. And the final path I would say is you want to continue to watch Lenzi Milian performances, or collaborations rather. I would recommend Rome Armed to the Teeth, or otherwise known as The Tough Ones. This one has a lot of Milian in it, and this one probably is the most kind of exemplary of the genre, I would say, of all the films mentioned. There's a good score. It's very, very episodic in nature. We get to see Milian doing his thing. I don't care for this film quite as much as other people. Nonetheless, I do think it's definitely worth watching if you are a fan of Poliziotteschi Eurocrime films. I've seen it a couple times. It's just not quite on the level of the top three films that I mentioned earlier. Okay, so yeah, like a lot of the genre masters and the Poliziotteschi masters working at this time, certainly Lenzi's work is also a product of the collaborators, both as actors, people like Milian and Merrily, but also people that scored his film, like people like Franco Michelizzi, who scored a number of these films and provides some really, really great scores. Ennio Morricone worked on Almost Human. I've seen one, I think it's The Gentleman's Guide to Midnight Cinema, classify, when talking about these Poliziotteschi, saying Damiano Damiani is sort of the intellectual type, whereas Castellari and Lenzi are kind of more on the romp side of things, and Fernando de Leo falls somewhere in the middle. I would mostly agree with that characterization. I would say compared to the romps of Castellari, his romps are a little different. Castellari is a very, very stylish director. In my opinion, probably the best action director of them. Lenzi, I would say, in comparison, is more willing to just get his hands dirty and get the whole thing, film dirty in terms of just grime and grit and things like that. And so in that sense, I think the man really, really, his voice embodies the genre. And when I'm thinking of Poliziotteschi, Umberto and Lenzi is not far from that. So while he's not 100% synonymous with it, the man worked in a lot of genres. I would say he's definitely one of the absolute 3 or 4 big voices that you should check out the films of. Okay, so that concludes this episode. Go and check out the films of Umberto and Lenzi, specifically his Poliziotteschi's, and let me know what you think. I'll see y'all next time. Cheers.